Hello and welcome to Storyboard. I am Anuradha Sengupta and I'm about to talk to Google's head of global sales and business development, Nikesh Arora. Now, Google says every search has a story. Today, we are going to look for where the Google story is at this point of time, and in doing that, we'll probably find out about the future of digital media as well as the state of the world we live in. Now, before we start off, let me remind you that Google's annual revenues last year were close to $23.5 billion, and this year, 6 months into 2010, they've already billed some $13.5 billion. Nikesh Arora, those are impressive numbers. If $13.5 billion in June, by the end of December, you're looking at $27 billion. Is that where you're headed?
Well, hopefully more than that if you look at the last few quarters from our trend perspective, but yeah, we hope so.
What is the key insight you've come away with where advertiser behavior is concerned vis-a-vis or with respect to digital media during a historic global recession? Because I think it would be fair to say that Google seems to have emerged pretty untouched or unscathed by what everybody else saw.
I think it's fair to think that there is a stronger consumer trend going on, even way more than the economic trend that we're looking at. And the strong consumer trend is that more and more people are spending more and more time online. And if you think about it, our lives on the internet are becoming a replica of how we live in society. And traditionally what has happened is advertising dollars have followed consumer behavior, whether it's from the newspaper to radio, from radio to television, and now from television to the internet. So I think the big insight is that this secular trend which is going on, which is consumer behavior, is stronger than any other economic trend for the moment.
Every other media got really badly bludgeoned. Why didn't digital media see it like that at all?
I think, to be fair, the early stages, and I think we are in the early stages of digital media, the early stages, digital media is way more measurable and way more accountable than other forms of media. You can measure every click. You can know, I know where you go, I can measure that click, I can show an advertiser what you did. So the whole measurement, the return on sort of investment type behavior of the first stages of digital media allow it to be an area where I can see the return on my investment. And it's pretty fair. Everybody knows you're not going to cost cut your way out of a recession. You have to grow your way out of a recession. And the way to grow is to get more consumers. The way to grow is to create more transactions. And digital media allows you that accountability for now to make that happen. So you will see a hit on the brand spends, but you don't end up seeing as much of a hit on measurable media.
The measurability of digital media, would I be right if I said, is also its biggest handicap, because people don't do brand building advertising online as much as you would like to see them do, and yet you're also saying in recent interviews that display is suddenly going to see this exponential growth. What is explaining this? Because display has been around for as long as digital media has been around.
That's true. I think those are fair observations. I think on the search side, what we're discovering is more and more people now need to be present on the web. From a brand awareness perspective, if our children search for something on the web and they don't find their favorite brand represented there, they believe that brand doesn't get it. So we're beginning to see interest in the branding side as well as search is concerned. However, I'd say display is where we're going to see a lot of action in the next upcoming years. I think there are two big interesting things going on. One is we're more and more consuming video on the web. So we're watching videos, we're watching our friends' videos, we're watching music, we're watching shows we were not able to watch on television. And advertising on the web as it relates to video is going to take on a very different form, because it's interactive. I can actually interact with an ad. I can't interact with my television, and I can't interact on the web. And B, the ad can be personalized, which means you and I don't have to watch the same ad constantly, or the same ad, everybody watches the same ad in the Super Bowl. So those two aspects, I think, allow for a very different advertising experience, which is going to evolve over the next few years as far as display is concerned. The second big interesting thing which is happening in display is, with the emergence of things like advertising exchanges and various other technologies, display is also becoming very measurable. And now you can measure the brand impact of display advertising going forward, which is going to allow, I think, for that whole space to continue to grow rapidly.
What is making display more measurable today than it was earlier?
What has happened in the past is that if I wanted to go spend a certain amount of money in display, I'd have to go talk to 20 different players or 20 different publishers of display. I'd have to talk to CNBC's website, I'd have to talk to a whole bunch of other people's website. And as an advertiser, I don't buy websites. I actually buy customer segments. So we're bringing technology into play which allows you to aggregate those 18 websites and say, would you like 5 million viewers who are between 18 and 24? And if you can find a way of packaging that web sort of consumer behavior into customer segments, advertisers are more likely to buy it because that's a language they understand. And that has not been done in the past, probably because of a lack of application of technology, lack of bringing various sort of pieces together. So that's really what's driving it.
We saw Google buy advertising time on television.
Yes.
During the famous Super Bowl last year,
Yes.
isn't it? We saw competitor Yahoo do one big global splash. We know Yahoo and Bing have tied up. Is this space going to be so competitive now in the search space that you guys will finally have to spend some money, advertising money on traditional media? And will that not be the supreme irony?
The genesis of the Super Bowl ad was when we loved some ad that had been created by a team of our people, when we thought that was very amusing, fantastic,
Yeah.
the Parisian love story.
Yeah, Storyboard talked about it a lot.
You know, fantastic. We're
Yeah.
glad. Well, thank you. We're glad you did. And somebody came up and said, "Hey, I have a great idea. We should show this on television." And we're sitting in a room. We pondered over it. We said, "That sounds wonderful. Let's do it." And we
So you did it for the love of the creativity of the ad?
We did it for the love of the creative of the ad.
Will we see Google do traditional advertising? Is it necessary now to do it given the competition in your core area of expertise, the
I
search
won't
space?
say yes and I won't say no. Maybe is a good enough answer, but we're not going to do it at any scale that you might sit there and think, "Oh my God, Google's changed its stripes." You know, we will do it if it's interesting. We will do it to get some people to pay attention to a certain part of our product portfolio. But broadly speaking, you have to understand, there's a fundamental belief. We believe the best form of advertising is a great product. And that belief is what Google is based on, right? We believe you create a phenomenal product and you stop worrying about price, you stop worrying about placement, you stop worrying about positioning, you just create a great product.
Just last week, I think Google acquired Slide, which is an entertainment company which we believe makes games for social networking sites. You all make, mobile phone software. You all are a search engine. You're a content aggregator. You're a distributor. What is Google today? How do you, as someone responsible for making Google earn money, tell yourself what is it that you're selling?
Well, I mean, look, come on. Google is a collection of wonderful people who love working together with each other, and we want to make great consumer products. Right? And beyond that, we pride ourselves in being a technology company. The founders had a vision. Their vision was they wanted to sort of, make the world's information accessible to everybody. And in the aspiration, in the quest for making the world's information accessible, it goes from trying to organize it, i.e. search, and then you realize that between me and you getting to the information, there are multiple parts to it. There is a role of software that software has to play. There is a role of storage in the cloud that it has to play. So as we discover these roadblocks, these bottlenecks, we find challenging technological problems, which people at Google get really excited about fixing. So, they say, "Hey, how do I access information successfully through a mobile phone?" So somebody says, "Hey, let's start a mobile operating system." Somebody says, "I don't like my browser. Why don't I find..." So you say, "Hey, well, great. Why don't you go build a better browser if you think you can?" So, we actually encourage people to come up with ideas which they will want to pursue.
So Google is
a technology company which monetizes itself using advertising, if you want the one-sentence answer.
You've been saying that growth for Google will come from populous countries where people are not yet online, and it'll
amongst other things, yes.
Amongst other things, and also from people who are online spending more time there. Question is, what are the challenges before you, seeing the kind of phenomenal growth that you all have seen since you all went public in 2004 when it comes to revenue?
5.5 years ago when I joined Google, we were a much smaller company. We had a lot less cash, we had a lot less people, we had a lot less products. So 5 years hence, we are continuing to grow revenues. We have a lot more cash. As a company, we have a lot more resources, so we should be able to apply a lot of our resources to continuing to solve these problems and drive future growth. A part of understanding Google is to understand what drives us, right? What drives us, what people wake up at Google every morning for, is they want to go out and wow the consumer. They want to create great consumer products. They want people to say, "I'm really excited about this. I want to use more of this." And then we sit down and say, if we build a large enough consumer following for our products, ways to monetize or ways to make money out of it will appear. And so far, we've been doing a reasonable job in monetizing that through advertising, which I think continues to be a mainstay of how we monetize various properties on the consumer side. We've also had some luck in monetizing some of our products in the enterprise space, which are some cloud-based application software that we're able to sell. And then there's some thoughts and some forays in how do we get people to pay for content or pay for different services in the web. So to be fair, historically, that's how people have made money in the media space. Either you sell subscriptions or you sell advertising or you sell a mix of both. And I think that's how the online media world is going to evolve as well.
You mentioned cloud computing. There seems to be this big race to be a big key player in that business. Now that's different from what you'll have sold otherwise. Here you'll, what is the kind of model that y'all will follow there? That's one. And second, how different does the sales job become when you're actually dealing with companies and not advertisers? I mean, they're also companies, but it's a different equation altogether.
Well, I think there are two different answers to that question, right? To be fair, you have to realize we are probably one of the largest cloud computing services to the consumer, right? Everything when you search on Google happens in the cloud.
That's true.
Nothing happens on your computer, and you get a result in a sub-second. So to be able to serve over 1 billion users in over 100 countries in less than a second must mean you must understand how to deliver services on the cloud very, very quickly. So we have a lot of experience providing cloud services to the end consumer. Believe it or not, companies are collections of end consumers. All of us are storing our personal data in the cloud. Our business data is still held in company servers. So logically that tells you that innovation has happened, the consumer has gotten used to using cloud services. Eventually businesses will follow the same trend because it's way more convenient, it's much more easy from an access perspective, it's much more wonderful from a cost perspective. So if you believe that, then it's about being able to convince the same companies who are advertisers who sort of operate in the internet space that this is a good thing for them to be able to do. Yes, it is a different sales job, but what's life without a bit of a challenge?
How is it different?
Because you're dealing with the technology departments, you're dealing with the CIOs as opposed to the marketing guys and the advertising guys, so it is different.
What share of Google's revenues do you see coming from cloud computing going forward? Just to give a sense of how important or how big this is.
Look, I hesitate to predict shares. Predictions always end up in the wrong place, so it's a good thing to not try and predict. But to be fair, we believe it's a very important space. We believe that we have some expertise, and we believe that people will end up using more and more of those things. And again, in some regards, I'm a little relaxed about what people end up using because it's the idea of getting people to start adopting new technology and getting them to do new things that excites us all, right? In that, if we have a bigger role to play, fantastic. If we don't have a bigger role to play, we'll play a bigger role in a different part of the value chain.
So in percentage terms?
I don't know the answer. Well tried though. Good effort. A for effort.
Okay. Interestingly, people who work with Google, your partners, have called you all kinds of things, trying to figure out what you all are. Yes. So to quote WPP's Martin Sorrell's famous term, frenemy, sometimes friend, sometimes enemy, very often enemy, more often enemy.
I take the more American intonation. I say he calls me a friend of me, but okay, frenemy works as well, yes.
Okay, the question is, and I've heard you say this, you're collaborating one day and you're competing the other. How does that work? Because today, Apple seems to be more of a competitor than a collaborator. Yahoo, I believe in Japan, is now a collaborator. What is happening and how does this kind of fluidity impact this business? And is this the nature of your business?
I think this is going to be the nature of technology for many years to come. We're all going to survive in a phase of co-opetition. In certain places we will collaborate, in certain places we will compete. And Apple and us compete in some places, and we collaborate in certain places. Apple has an advertising platform. We have a mobile advertising company we recently acquired. We serve advertising on iPhones. iPhones and Android are competitive in the marketplace. At the same time, we provide search services to Apple. So there will be areas where we will compete respectfully as competitors, and there will be areas where we will collaborate because we both understand that one person does something much better than the other, and it's probably better to work together on that. And that's the case, whether it's the case with Yahoo and Google in Japan, and that's the case whether it's with WPP and Google as it relates to advertising. We are in a time of change, and that change requires certain models to change going forward, and then change is sometimes hard.
People are increasingly confused about what to expect from Google. You've answered several questions over the years about the privacy issues, but I think that argument or that concern seems to be growing virally and online. Why does it seem that Google, as it's growing and diversifying, can become more and more dangerous?
I don't get the sense personally that it is it is such an event like you describe it. I think maybe it's more the event in the eyes of journalists or people who
I'll
end
send
up
you
reading.
some viral spots that are going around about how Google is actually now creating toilets that, use your famous analytics to, to check what people are dumping into the toilet every day. So,
Well,
I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. I can send it to you.
That's clearly
But,
a figment of somebody's imagination, and
clearly,
clearly.
but I think the media is picking up what people are saying online, isn't it?
Well, I guess, look, there's multiple answers to that question. I think clearly, on one end, the internet itself is becoming mainstream. So what used to be a hobby, what used to be on the side, is now center stage in our lives. And as I said, the internet mirrors society, right? Suddenly we are finding concerns that people are beginning to have because they believe the internet is different. One fundamental thing the internet does, it destroys borders, right? All of our lives, regulation and control has been structured around borders. On the internet, you have no borders. So now it's very hard to figure out how do you control for all the things you were able to control for so many years, right? So that's one fundamental issue that happens. The other issue which happens is when you live in a digital world, you will leave footprints. We've been leaving footprints as individuals on credit cards for 20 years. And we've been fine with that footprint because we trust the company that has the credit card, because we believe they won't abuse our data. So in that context, the internet has not had such a long history or doesn't have as much experience. We understand that for us to operate in the future, we have to maintain an environment of trust. We have to maintain the fact that we're not going to compromise consumer information, consumer data. And to be fair, I think in our 11-year history, we've tried to do a good enough job.
And yet there have been slips, isn't it?
There will
Whether
be
it was
slips.
Google Buzz, which you all rectified.
There will be
Whether
slips.
there were these, I was reading somewhere that in about 30 countries, you all were,
we collected Wi-Fi
tracking,
data, yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, there was just, all the data that we collected is on one hard drive, so it was as much data as you might think. But the one philosophy we have at Google is we want to be very upfront and honest about anything that we do, because that is essential to maintaining trust.
But is there a trust deficit, you think, with your users, with your end users, not
I
the
hope
media?
not. I hope not, because you understand that when the trust is lost, people leave brands in hordes, and we are not seeing that. People come to Google every day because they believe that we are well-intentioned. They believe that we will not do something wrong, and they believe that we will handle the data carefully and in a trustworthy fashion. There will be mistakes if you're operating in an internet environment where you're experimenting and you're innovating. So there's always that balance you have to strike between innovation and stability and providing predictability. And we think we're striking it right. Yes, we will make mistakes, and if we do, we'll stand up to them and we will fix them as quickly as we can.
Your founders have written, the founders letter, and the first sentence there says, Google is not a conventional company. We do not intend to become one. But over the last 7-8 years, doesn't it seem that Google has become a conventional company? Copyright seems to be up in the air. Do you think as Google grows in size, scale, success, that is getting in the way of its founding statement, which is we are not a conventional company, we don't intend to become one?
We don't see ourselves as wanting to be a conventional company, but you have to be careful. You can't just challenge convention for the sake of challenging convention. You have to challenge convention where you believe you can create a phenomenal experience for the end user in which conventional thinking comes in the way. And it doesn't mean you have to be unconventional about everything. It doesn't mean you have to start getting people to come to work at night and go home in the morning just because convention is to do it the other way around. So we will follow convention where it makes sense to disrupt convention because we believe there's a higher order calling or a higher order result we can achieve without the use of convention. We're going to do it, and we decided to disrupt the mobile phone operating software industry because we believed there was a better way for the end user to get a better experience, so we built Android. We choose not to manage things on a quarterly basis. So yes, we will challenge convention where it makes sense. The fact that we're getting more scrutiny as we get larger is a consequence of perhaps our success, perhaps because the internet is becoming more mainstream, and perhaps because sometimes we're sort of seen as the messenger for the internet as opposed to just another player.
You all do Zeitgeist, regularly. Tell us what the world is thinking, what the world wants to do. You've helped people have an instant memory. Do you think that will change the way our brain functions, one? And second thing is, do you think the amount of time people spend online, the lives they lead online, the social networks, that they have created for themselves online, is actually taking away from their real lives and their real relationships?
I bet my parents wondered about me using more technology 20 years ago, so I'm sure we can have the same worry. Let's take those two different questions. Sorry, the first one was around the instant gratification society we live in, which is we get instant access to instant memory, you call it, right? So we have access to information. Somebody asked me the other day, what is the first music video that played on television? What's the answer?
Yeah, I don't know.
Google it after this. You'll know, and you won't forget it, right? So that's most likely. That's most likely what's going to happen. Well, somebody asked me the question, I didn't know the answer, so I had to go Google it. So I recommend you do the same. But you know, if it's very simple. If you look for information, you're more likely to remember it than if it's thrust upon you, right? So this is what we've learned. By the way, this is the way internet advertising works. If you look for something and you see a Google ad, you're most likely to click on it than if you just were shown advertising in your face. Proven. So I think. So, you know, I think, yes, there is value to having access to information. The other question which you asked was an interesting question, which is a lifestyle question, is that, you know, we tend to end up spending more of our lives online, which is perfectly fine, but just compare and contrast the amount of convenience we get. I'm sure you were able to prepare for this interview a lot quicker than you would have had to 10 years ago when you had to go through stacks of newspapers. You probably missed half of it. So just imagine the number of hours we saved you by instant access to information.
No one is denying the
wait. So my point is, if there is so much convenience, hopefully you save those 6 hours which you would have spent otherwise researching, and you're hopefully deploying those hours now doing something more useful than doing that stuff. So, you know, there's a balance between convenience. It gets evens out, right? Right, this is why we went.
I'm not so sure.
This is like you saying, well, I don't know if it's a good idea to have cars and planes or not because we end up traveling.
But do you have existential questions about things like this personally?
Existential questions?
Yes.
What's that?
Yeah. Do you wonder about these things?
Look, we wonder about these, and I think every generation wonders about the next level of convenience we get. And with convenience, it goes down to how you personally moderate excess. Excess of anything is bad. If you end up spending too much of your time online, you end up spending too much of your time playing games, if you end up too much time on airplanes, it's bad for you. If you've got to figure out how to regulate yourself in this new world of convenience, I'm sure we'll all come up and make the right decision. And so for some people, it'll be more, some people will be less.
Nikesh Arora, it's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you very
much.
My pleasure.